Hi, I am Jenna Lemire, and I today am going to be reading some of the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall B. Rosenberg, PhD. I have a little older edition. This is second edition, but there's definitely other ones out there. I don't think there's a whole bunch of super new differences, hopefully, between them. And the reason I'm reading this today is because I'm also involved in a shadow work resource center called brightanddark.org. Many of the people in this group are neurodivergent, myself included, and then the other woman who founded it is also neurodivergent. And we've found that the little things, nuggets that we've learned from just even skimming through this book were so valuable that we're making it sort of like a requirement for anybody that works within the resource center to know about nonviolent communication and to be trying their best to communicate in these ways. And so what I've decided to do is there's also a book club that meets within the resource center too. This happens to be the book that is in rotation. A lot of times the other books are about, witchcraft or those kind of things, because the resource center, the shadow work resource center, but it's geared toward magical practitioners. So it brings in a lot of new brooms like witches, but it also brings in people who identify as starseeds. You don't have to identify as any of those things to still come to the resource center and to get support. So it's just super freedom-based in however you believe. Anyway, so without further ado, I'm going to begin reading the book on this video because not everybody is a reader. I actually can retain a little better by listening to somebody else read to me. So in case there are people out there that have been wanting to read nonviolent communication, but would rather have it read to them, this is your resource. Also, I've noticed, being neurodivergent, that for me, putting on like YouTube at the bottom, the little speed, if I double the time, at the rate in which my processor speed goes in my brain, I actually can comprehend information in double time. So what this also does is it allows you, if you need to slow it down for your processing speed, go ahead, but some people may need to also speed it up. So it gives you the freedom to be able to take in a lot more information at whatever speed that your particular brain is running at. And you can be open to yourself having that speed up or down in different themes of your life too. It may not always be where sometimes you need to slow it down, sometimes you need to speed it up. Okay, so I'm going to start. There's some acknowledgments and stuff at the beginning too. I normally don't read forewords, but I liked this one, so I think I am going to read it because it's by the grandson of Gandhi. And I just thought this was nice. So here we go. So this is by Aaron Gandhi, founder president of MK Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence. Growing up as a person of color in apartheid South Africa in the 1940s was not something anyone relished. It was especially true if you were brutally reminded of your skin color every moment of every day. And then to be beaten up at the age of 10 by white youths because they considered you too Black, and then by Black youths because they considered you too white is a humiliating experience that could drive anyone to vengeful violence. I was so outraged by my experiences that my parents decided to take me to India and leave me for some time with grandfather, the legendary MK Gandhi, so that I could learn from him how to deal with the anger, the frustration, the discrimination, and the humiliation that violent color prejudice can evoke in you. In those 18 months, I learned more than I anticipated. My only regret now is that I was just 13 years old and a mediocre student at that. If I was only older, or was a little older, a bit wiser, and a bit more thoughtful, I could have learned so much more. But one must be happy with what one has received and not be greedy, a fundamental lesson in nonviolent living. How can I forget this? One of the many things I learned from grandfather is to understand the depth and breadth of nonviolence and to acknowledge that we are all violent and that we need to bring about a qualitative change in our attitudes. We often don't acknowledge our violence because we are ignorant about it, We assume that we're not violent because our vision of violence is one of fighting, killing, beating, and wars, the type of things that the average individuals don't do. To bring this home to me, grandfather made me draw a family tree of violence using the same principles as are used for a genealogical tree. His argument was that I would have a better appreciation of nonviolence if I understood and acknowledged the violence that exists in the world. He assisted me every evening to analyze the day's happenings, everything that I experienced, read about, saw, or did to others, and put them down on a tree, either under physical, if it was violence where physical force was used, or under passive, if it was the type of violence where the hurt was more emotional. Within a few months, I covered one wall in my room with acts of passive violence that grandfather described as being more insidious than physical violence. He then explained that passive violence ultimately generated anger in the victim as an individual or as a member of a collective. Let me read that. He then explained that passive violence ultimately generated anger in the victim who, as an individual or as a member of collective, responded violently. In other words, it is passive violence that fuels the fire of physical violence. It is because we don't understand or appreciate this concept that all our efforts to work for peace have either not fructified or the peace that we achieved was only temporary. How can we extinguish a fire if we don't first cut off the fuel that ignites the inferno? Grandfather always vociferously stressed that the need for nonviolence in communication, something that Marshall Rosenberg has been doing admirably for many years through his writings and his seminars. I read with considerable interest Mr. Rosenberg's book, Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life, and was impressed by the depth of his work and the simplicity of the solutions. Unless, as grandfather would say, we become the change that we wish to see in the world, no change will ever take place. We're all, unfortunately, waiting for the other person to change first. Nonviolence is not a strategy that can be used today and discarded tomorrow, nor is it something that makes you meek or a pushover. Nonviolence is about inculcating positive attitudes to replace the negative attitudes that dominate us. Everything that we do is conditioned by selfish motives, what's in it for me, and even more so in an overwhelmingly materialistic society that thrives on rugged individualism. None of these negative concepts is conducive to building a homogeneous family, community, society, or nation. It is not important that we come together in a moment of crisis and show our patriotism by flying the flag. It is not enough that we become a superpower by building an arsenal that can destroy this earth several times over. It is not enough that we subjugate the rest of the world through our military might, because peace cannot be built on the foundations of fear. Nonviolence means allowing the positive within you to emerge. Be dominated by love, respect, understanding, appreciation, compassion, and concern for others, rather than the self-centered and selfish, greedy, hateful, prejudiced, suspicious, and aggressive attitudes that usually dominate our thinking. We often hear people say, "This world is ruthless, and if you want to survive, you must become ruthless too." I humbly disagree with this contention. This world is what we have made of it. If it is ruthless today, it is because we have made it ruthless by our attitudes. If we change ourselves, we can change the world, and changing ourselves begins with changing our language and methods of communication. I highly recommend reading this book and applying the nonviolent communication process it teaches. It is a significant first step towards changing our communication and creating a compassionate world. Aaron Gandhi. So, and I wanted to just note that another big reason that we're also tackling this book in our community is because a lot of it is based in magical practices and spellcraft. And if we think about the power and intention of our words, and it's the whole practice of witchcraft is about personal empowerment. It is about going inside. It is about self-investigation. And it's about using and harnessing your own power to basically become a deliberate creator in your own reality, thus changing your own frequency, thus changing the frequency that you see around you, and then everyone benefits. So being able to pinpoint more about our vocabulary, what we're using to, or how conscious we are of the words that we use, how conscious we are of what is opening doors of communication, how conscious we are of things that we say that are closing doors of communication, all this kind of stuff. So we will learn together, and I'm going to stop here for just kind of the forward and intro, and give some time to breathe, and then we will dig into chapter 1 together. All right, bye.